What was the game that most marked your childhood? The one who changed everything, that was more than just a game. For me, the answer is simple: Age of Mythology. I still remember when I was a little boy and my mom brought me to a house of one of her friends that also had a son. They quickly invited me to join him at his room, so they could discuss the kind of things mothers discuss when their sons aren't there. Upon entering this room, with brown walls etched forever in my memory, I noticed that he was playing a game, an RTS. I already knew and liked the concept, since someone had installed a pirate version of Warcraft 2 on my school computer. But this game was different. The characters weren't the generic knights or orcs that I didn't care about. The player controlled Odysseus, Ajax, Agamemnon, trying to build the Trojan horse in secret. These characters that I have loved so much were under my control. I was already completely in love with this game. A strategy game about Greek mythology. It was a dream becoming true. And then, the son of my mother's friend, whose name and face I have completely forgotten, the one who had a room with brown walls, said a phrase to me, a simple phrase that changed my destiny. And this phrase, this divine phrase was, "Dude, you can also play with Egyptians." Alas, I did not have enough money, and my parents' computer was not powerful enough for such a game. For years, I had to be content with Age of Empires 1, but my best friend had Age of Mythology in his house, and every time I visit him, we spend hours and hours playing and cheating against the easy difficulty, because we didn't want to admit that we are incapable to create strategies. I still remember, years later, in my early teens, when I was finally able to buy my own CD-ROM. The thrill I felt when the box arrived. I felt like I was becoming an adult. I had my own Age of Mythology that I could play whenever I wanted. And then, the time passed. I grew up and fell in love by other games. I am a nostalgic, of course, and I have the extended edition on Steam. But today, I rarely play Age of Mythology. But in the last few days, while I was trying to have ideas, a funny concept came to me. Why not make a video revisiting this game, but with the eyes of an adult, an Egyptologist? Has the game aged well? It is historically accurate? Those questions intrigue me. So, here we are. Let's go back to a simple time, when all you needed to be happy was to hear someone yell,
Prostagma, 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 malista. Prostagma, 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 malista.
So, to begin, I would like to leave something clear. I am not a specialist in video games, and this is not a professional review. This is the point of view of a nostalgic fan and a history buff. To judge this game, I will use two scores. Fun, because fun is the point of video games, and history accuracy, because, let's be honest, this is probably why you are watching this video. So let's begin with...
Prostagma, 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 Malista. Prostagma, 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 Malista.
I don't know what to say. This game is extremely fun, but I can explain why. If this video took a long time to come out, it was because each time I write a page of the script, I decided to play 2 hours of the game. So let's try to start with asking, what is Age of Mythology? This game is a RTS, real-time strategy, where you choose a civilization, start as a small village, have to build farm, mines, buildings, armies, become a great empire, and conquer other players. This game is the third in the Age of Empires series, and follows almost the same formula that his glorious old brother Age of Empires 2. However, the game adds several details and mechanics that make it unique. For example, for the first time, each civilization has a different way of playing. The Egyptians are focused on economy and defense, the Norse are offensive, and the Greeks more balanced. But the biggest change is the addition of the mythological side. Each civilization has 3 gods that you can worship, and each one brings different bonus, powers, creatures, and minor deities. So, if you like to be a player with good economy, try playing with Isis. If you want to try everything that moves, Loki, etc, etc, etc. Like I said at the start of this video, this game is a childhood dream becoming true. You control an army of mythological creatures in epic battles, you summon the power of the gods, and you can even have a titan to aid you in battle. And the music of this game is so good and immersive. I still use it in my tabletops RPGs, and everyone who have played Age of Mythology will recognize it immediately. And, to my surprise, the graphics have aged well. I am not the type of gamer that cares too much about graphics. However, I really have a hard time playing games from the early 3D age. Age of Mythology was the first game from Ensemble Studios to have the 3 dimensions. And even today, it looks okay, although a definitive version would be welcome. However, not everything is perfect in this game. I find it very frustrating that you can use each power only once, making a lot of them practically useless. I know they did it like this to better balance the game, but I wish I could rebuy the powers. And even as a child, I found that the campaign did not have a good history. They had access to 3 different mythologies, with some of the most fascinating and famous characters in human history. And our protagonist is, well, a generic hero on a generic quest to save the world from a generic villain. But let's be honest, the gameplay and presentation are so good that we don't care. Age of Mythology will get, of course, 5 happy pharaohs of 5. Now, the moment that we are all waiting for. Let's talk about
Prostagma, 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 malista. Prostagma, prostagma. Prostagma, prostagma, malista.
In Age of Mythology, the Egyptians have two types of unit. Those from the barracks, weak, and will need help of towers to repel enemies, and those of the stronghold, unlocked only in the Third Age, expensive but powerful. And these represent pretty well the evolution of the Egyptian army, that was not known by its strength and needed deserts and fortifications to protect Egypt. It was only during the New Kingdom that Egypt became a great military power, with a costly but efficient army. Coming back to the game, the Egyptians have 4 types of infantry: X-Men, Spearmen, Slinger, and if you are playing with the extended edition, Khopesh Swordmen. Those units are historically accurate. Axes, spears, and slingers were the most common weapons in the Egyptian army. Due to manufacturing cost, the Khopesh sword was less used, but its popularity would increase during the New Kingdom, and it was used until the Ptolemaic period. Another important detail is that these units also carry shields, another classic element in the Egyptian army, even though they were made with leather and not bronze, as seems to be the case in Age of Mythology. Alas, the game makes a big mistake by giving armor for these units. Due to the great heat of the desert, the Egyptians rarely used armor. When they did, it was made with cloth and leather. We have evidence that the pharaohs had access to bronze protections, but it was a privilege of the nobility. Now let's talk about elite units. Alas, of the 3 units, only one is historically accurate: the archer chariots. If you know a little about Egyptian military history, you already know that this weapon was used a lot by the pharaonic force during the New Kingdom. However, there is no evidence that camels were used in warfare. Indeed, there is almost no image of camels in Egyptian art, which proves that these animals were quite rare. Regarding elephants, the only time they were used was during the Ptolemaic period, and the elephants did not come from Egypt. I think they added this unit to Africanize the Egyptian armies, with animals associated with the continent and the desert. There is another detail about the Egyptian units that bothers me, but in this case, this detail can be very controversial. The units are, well, very Caucasian, and the weird part is that with peasants and the pharaoh, the color of their skin is much more realistic. Another cool detail is that you can recruit mercenaries if necessary. By the color of their skin, I suppose they are Kushites. And this is an excellent mechanic, because the Egyptians used a lot of mercenaries in their time of crisis. The only problem is that they have Zulu shields? Zulu? Well, Rome Total War made the same mistake. I guess it is to Africanize the game. Anyway, now that we have finished with the soldiers, the time has come to explore the wonderful world of
Prostagma, prostagma. Prostagma, prostagma, malista. Prostagma, prostagma. Prostagma, prostagma, malista.
Contrary to Greek mythology, the Egyptians did not describe many monsters to us. This doesn't mean that they didn't have monsters, but most of times, we only have their names. So, the developers had to be creative, and let's see what they came up. My favorite creature. The Anubis is a jackal-headed warrior who can jump really high. I love this unit so much that one of my first D&D characters was a Nanobite. Alas, there is no indication in Egyptian culture of such a creature. However, some priests wore Anubis masks during funeral rites. These masks were not used for warfare, but there is a small connection with the Anubites. Wadjets were not creatures, but the patron deity of Lower Egypt, and in some representations she appears with wings. It is a common mistake to believe that Sphinx were Egyptian monsters, but they were only a way to represent the king in sculpture. In fact, the Sphinx is a Greek monster that was mistaken by Egyptian statues, from where this inaccuracy probably came from. Petshukos were sacred crocodiles who were worshipped in the city of Shedid. He was known as the son of the god Sobek, and when a Petshukos died, his body was mummified and he was replaced by another. The rock is a giant eagle that can carry troops, and that has nothing to do with Egyptian culture, but kind of remind me of a Monty Python joke.
What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
What do you mean? An African or European swallow?
Huh? I don't know that.
The scrub was very much represented in Egyptian art, but not as a warrior. He was a representation of the rising sun. A cool detail is that to unlock this creature, you must worship Sekhmet, who was known as the Wrath of Ra. It's very nice that his unit is a violent version of an animal associated with the sun. Like the Wadjet, there were no half-human, half-scorpion creatures in ancient Egyptian mythology. But there is a goddess who was represented like that, Selket, the goddess of scorpions. Avenger is simply a generic version of Horus, without no connection with Egyptian culture. At least, the visual is cool. The Phoenix is a stranger case. This animal is Greek, and I have found no connection with Egyptians. Honestly, I would have chosen to call this unit Ben-Ben, the type of the pyramids and obelisk which represented the island where the first god created the universe, and which was sometimes represented as a bird. What would be ancient Egypt without its cursed mummies? I will say what would be more historically accurate. This idea of the mummy as a monster that awakens and attacks the living is an invention of Hollywood. Even though the Egyptians believed in an afterlife, no one considered that a dead body could walk again. But I can understand why they added this unit. The image of the mummy is now too strong in the popular imagination. Son of Osiris is one of the most fascinating units in this game. At first glance, it seems to be another generic version of Horus. But not only it is one of the most powerful units in the game, to gain access to it, you have to throw a spell on the pharaoh, so it can be transformed into Son of Osiris. The cool part is that in Egyptian culture, when a king died, he transformed into Osiris, and his son into Horus. I love how the game takes this idea and makes the pharaoh literally turns into the son of Osiris. On the Titan, I have nothing to say. Of course, the Titan is a Greek concept, and the game never makes clear who the Egyptian Titan is supposed to be, probably a representation of Horus. The Egyptians also have 2 aquatic mythic units, and I can understand that find Egyptian sea monsters is hard, because almost never they ventured into sea, and the only sea monster that I could find is a giant serpent, guardian of a temple of Thoth undersea. By the way, giant snakes were very common in Egyptian tales. Alas, the creatures found in this game are totally absurd. We have the Leviathan, a biblical monster, and a giant turtle, animal who almost never appeared in Egyptian culture. The architecture of this game is really well done. Most of the buildings, like the house, the barracks, resemble a lot of what we assumed to be the architecture of the Bronze Age. The Lighthouse of Alexandria is also a great recreation. But, on the negative side, the temple is a bit weird, as well as the stronghold. I'm also a little divided with the wonder. The Sphinx itself is okay, but why they add pylons? It looks like the Sphinx was built on a temple, which is a very strange choice. And talking about strange choice, the Egyptians did not use the siege weapons like catapults and assault towers, but I understand that their inclusion was necessary to balance the game.
Prostagma, prostagma. Prostagma, prostagma. Malista. Prostagma, prostagma. Prostagma, prostagma. Malista.
To be honest, I'm happily surprised by Age of Mythology. Although being historically correct was not a priority of the developers, they did a great job of ensuring that most units were at least inspired by archaeological evidence. And for this, I give Age of Mythology 4 happy pharaohs of 5. Well done, Ensemble Studios, well done. Thanks for watching this video. If you are interested in Egyptian history, try watching one of my other videos. And tell me in the comments which game or movie you would like to see analyzed in this format. Senepti!